They left her bleeding in the dust until the quiet cowboy carried her home. She lay in the dust where they left her, one boot gone, the other twisted under her. Blood from her mouth had already dried in the heat, cracked like riverbed clay. Her skirt was ripped high, not from vanity but violence, and one sleeve hung loose where someone had torn it off. The sun didn't pause. Neither did the people. They walked past her like she was part of the ground, like she'd been there all along and maybe always would be. A boy looked once. His mother yanked his arm. "Don't stare." She didn't move. Couldn't. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, barely enough to stir the dust. One eye swelled shut. The other stared out, unfocused. There was no one left to call. The law had laughed. The preacher had looked away, and the man who did this had tipped his hat after and gone back inside for a drink. The door swung open again. Someone stepped out, not in a hurry, not like he came for drama. Just a man with a coat too long for summer and boots too worn for Sunday. He saw her. That was the difference. He stopped. The poker game inside kept going. The sun kept burning. But he walked down the steps, past the gawkers, through the silence that followed women like her. He knelt. His hands didn't shake. He touched her wrist like it meant something. Her eye fluttered. Her lips parted. She couldn't say anything. He didn't ask. He just lifted her gently like he knew how, like he'd done it before, and stood, her head against his chest, her blood soaking into his shirt. The town kept watching. But still, no one followed. They said she brought it on herself. That kind of woman always did. She walked with her shoulders square, looked men in the eye, didn't lower her voice when they muttered behind her. She was trouble. Not because she lied, but because she didn't. Not because she seduced, but because she wouldn't bow. The barkeep said she drank like a man. The seamstress said she dressed like one. The banker's wife said she never smiled, even when spoken to sweet. No one asked why she kept her sleeves long in July. No one wondered why her lip was split twice in the same week. No one cared that she slept in the back of the livery on straw that smelled of rot, or that she hadn't been seen with family since her brother vanished in the war. They saw the bruises but didn't call them what they were. They saw the silence but mistook it for arrogance. She'd warned him. The man who dragged her behind the saloon told him once, clear and steady, that no meant no. He laughed, then hit her hard enough to steal the breath from her spine. The town saw her stumble from the alley, bleeding and dazed, saw her collapse in the street, and still, they crossed the road. The cowboy hadn't. He'd lifted her as if she was more than what they'd named her. He didn't spit, didn't flinch, didn't look around for approval. She rested in his arms like a secret finally spoken. Her fingers curled in the fabric of his coat, not to hold on, but to remember what it felt like to not be alone. They didn't ask her name, but he would carry it long before she ever said it. The cowboy had been there since before the shouting started. Hat pulled low, coat dusted with the trail, his whiskey sat untouched, sweating on the warped rail. He didn't drink when there was danger near, and something in the air had gone sour the moment she walked through town. He saw the way the men looked at her, like she was prey, like pride alone made her worth hunting. He watched her cross the street with her jaw set, boots heavy, shoulders refusing to drop. He saw the first shove, then the second, saw the barkeep look away, saw the law finish his drink without rising. She didn't scream. That part stayed with him. She didn't plead, didn't run, didn't beg like they expected her to. She swung once, hard, and landed it. And that's when they turned cruel. He could have stepped in, but not yet. Not until the town proved what it was. She fell outside the saloon, and no one caught her. Blood on the wood, dust in her mouth, the sun hot on her face like it too had chosen sides. The cowboy didn't flinch. Not when the man spat on her. Not when the others laughed. His breath stayed even. His hand never left the glass. But his eyes never blinked. They were waiting for her to crawl. She didn't. That's when they left her, like a broken thing tossed aside. He waited 5 more seconds, just long enough to be sure no one else would. Then he moved. Slow. Measured. The scrape of his boots louder than the snickering. louder than the guilt no one wore. When he reached her, the shadows seemed to follow. And when he lifted her, the world quieted like it knew it had just been seen. He stepped down from the saloon porch like time had shifted just for him. Not fast, not angry, just steady, like his weight belonged to the earth more than the wood behind him. The boards creaked once, sharp as a shot. A few heads turned. Most didn't. The cowardice in a town like this didn't wear a face. It wore silence. His coat moved with the wind, dry and stiff from travel, edges curled where rain once tried and failed to soak through. His boots touched the dirt, and the dust lifted slow, like even it knew not to rise too loud. She lay just ahead, half sprawled, blood curling down her temple. Her hair matted to one cheek. She hadn't moved since the last boot found her ribs. Still breathing, but barely. He didn't run, he didn't shout, just walked. Right past the man who did it, who watched from the saloon door with a smirk still clinging to his teeth. That smirk faltered. The sheriff leaned against a barrel down the way, saw the cowboy move but didn't rise, didn't reach for his badge. The townsfolk made room. Not with intention, but with instinct. Something about the way he carried himself made them shift. Part their shoulders. Swallow their judgment. By the time he reached her, the street had stilled. Not a voice, not a breath. Just the creak of his knee as he knelt beside her. He touched her wrist, 2 fingers, gentle as a prayer. Then slid one arm beneath her shoulders, the other behind her knees. Lifted her like something sacred that the world had dropped. No one stopped him. No one dared. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The weight of his silence said more than any law ever had. Her breath came in shallow stutters, ribs tight like the air itself hurt. She didn't lift her head when the shadow fell across her. Didn't open her eyes when the weight shifted beside her. But when his hand touched her wrist, steady, warm, not grabbing, not taking, her body flinched. A memory without shape or name. But she didn't pull away. He didn't say anything, just knelt in the dirt and let his silence hold her longer than any words could have. She drifted in and out, more ache than thought, more blood than woman. But when his arms came around her, something inside her didn't scream, didn't brace. Something deep, buried beneath bruises and shame, uncoiled. He smelled like sun-baked leather and pine smoke, like someone who lived close to the land and far from lies. Her cheek pressed to his chest, and the beat of his heart reached her before his steps did. She didn't know him. Not his name. Not his face. But her bones did. They remembered the way her father once carried her, barefoot and fevered through the snow. The way her brother used to steady her saddle from behind. The way no man had touched her since without trying to own her. This felt different. She wasn't light, not anymore, not after everything. But he held her like weight wasn't a burden, like it was a reason. Her fingers twitched once, brushed his collar, not grasping, just knowing. And when the wind caught the edge of his coat and lifted it like a banner, the town didn't see a man carrying a broken woman. They saw something they didn't understand. And for the first time, that made her feel like maybe she wasn't the one who should be ashamed. He carried her past the saloon, past the bakery, past the stairs that stuck like burrs. Her head rested in the crook of his arm, hair tangled and dark with blood. One eye fluttered, then stilled. Her breath caught now and then, but he didn't shift his hold. No wagon rolled behind him, no stretcher waited. Just 2 arms and the kind of silence that made people forget how to speak. Her blood seeped into the cotton of his shirt, warm at first, then sticky. He didn't look down, didn't look back. The sheriff opened his mouth once, then closed it. A dog barked in the distance. Somewhere, a door slammed. But in the street, there was only the rhythm of his boots. One step, then another. Like each footfall meant something. Like he was delivering her to something holy, not hiding something broken. The chapel bell rang noon. No one moved. A child pointed. His mother pulled his hand down. Don't. The man didn't speak, didn't nod, didn't meet a single eye. He walked like he'd done this before. like carrying someone ruined was second nature. And maybe it was. Maybe that was why no one stopped him. He didn't take her to the doctor. He didn't ask directions. He passed the jail, the store, the mayor's house, turned down a dirt road where the grass grew too tall and the fence posts leaned like old men with secrets. By the time he reached the edge of town, the dust on his boots had thickened, but his pace never broke. She stirred once. A sound, soft and raw. Barely a word. He tightened his grip. Not to hold her tighter, but to say, "I'm still here, and I'm not letting go." The cabin sat where the land stopped pretending to care. Half hidden by brush, leaning into itself like it had given up long ago. No smoke from the chimney. No path worn to the door. Just a place forgotten by names and maps. He shouldered it open with the weight of her still in his arms. The hinges moaned. Dust swirled in the dim light. The air smelled of old wood, ash, and memory. Inside, the floor groaned but held. A chair missing a leg. A hearth black with years. Cracked walls papered with spiders. But in the corner, a bed. Cot-sized. Slanted. Covered in a blanket gone gray with time. He laid her down like she was something precious, even now, bruised and half-broken. His coat came off first, spread over her like a shield. Then the canteen. Water dripped onto a rag he pulled from his pocket, clean, despite the dirt on his boots. He wiped the blood from her temple, pressed the cloth to the worst of it, hands sure, careful, like he'd patched flesh before, like this wasn't new. She didn't wake, but she didn't flinch either. He didn't light a lamp, didn't speak, just sat beside the bed with his back to the wall, legs stretched long, rifle untouched at his side. Outside, the wind tugged at the loose boards. Inside, it was quiet except for her breath. Slow, catching, stubborn. The cabin hadn't been lived in for years. Not really. But now it held two hearts. One that beat steady, and one that refused to quit. He didn't look tired. He looked like a man waiting. Not for thanks. Not for forgiveness. Just for her to open her eyes and know that this time, she wasn't alone. She woke like someone rising from the bottom of a well, slow, disoriented, breath shallow. The first thing she noticed was the smell. Not blood, not rot. Sage. Dried and burned. Faint on the air like a memory meant to calm. His coat lay over her shoulders, heavy with warmth. Her blouse was gone. In its place, strips of linen wrapped careful around her ribs, her shoulder, her thigh. Someone had cleaned her wounds with patience, not pity. Her fingers twitched. The blanket scratched. Her throat burned. Beside the bed, a mug of water waited. She reached for it, hand shaking, then paused when she saw him. He sat in the corner by the fire, one knee bent, one hand resting on it. His eyes were on the flames, not her. His hat was gone. Hair too long curled at his neck. Shadows flickered across the planes of his face, sharp and quiet like carved stone. She watched him like she might startle him. But he didn't move, didn't turn. Just said, gently, without speaking, "I know you're awake." She sipped the water. It tasted like the tin it came from, and something else. Effort. Her lips cracked as she set it down. She tried to speak. Her voice broke on the first word. He looked at her then. No startle, no smile. Just eyes that held ground and didn't ask anything of her. She swallowed. Why? He didn't answer, just reached behind him, slow, and placed a folded piece of cloth on the bed beside her. It was hers. The sash from her dress. Torn the night they hurt her. Washed now. Mended. Her fingers closed around it. Not for comfort, just to feel that something broken could still be whole again. Her voice cracked against the stillness like a twig underfoot. Why? Just one word, brittle as old paper, but it cost her everything to say it. Her throat burned raw. Her chest ached with each breath. He didn't move for a long while. Just watched her the way someone might watch a fire from too close. knowing it could warm or destroy, but not backing away. Then, without a sound, he reached into the inside pocket of his coat, pulled something small. Cloth. Faded blue. Frayed at the corners, but folded careful like it mattered. He set it on the blanket between them and leaned back. She looked down. Slowly. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. It was a handkerchief. The kind her mother used to stitch for Sunday clothes. But this one had a name sewn into the corner. Lena, she whispered. The name scraped out of her like it had waited in silence for too long. She hadn't heard it in years. Not since the old life. Not since she buried the last person who said it without venom. The name they stole from her. Tears came then, sudden and hot. Not for him. Not even for the pain. But for the thread, the shape of those letters, the way the L curved like a promise that hadn't died. She clutched it to her chest. The name. The proof. Where did you get this? He didn't speak, didn't blink, just met her eyes and let the silence carry the weight of what she already knew. Someone had remembered her. Someone had seen her before the fall. And he had carried that memory back to her like a gift no one else thought she deserved. She didn't notice it at first. Not until he shifted near the fire, shadows peeling back just enough to let the flame touch his skin. His coat had fallen open at the neck, collar pushed low. That's when she saw it. Just above his collarbone. A scar, round and warped, half hidden beneath the fray of his shirt. She froze. It wasn't just a scar. It was a brand. The same shape they'd tried to burn into her when she fought back. When she refused silence. The mark meant to shame her. Strip her of name, of story, of self. But on him, it was older. Faded at the edges. Healed, though not forgotten. Her breath caught. Her voice too broken to speak again, so she reached out. Slow. Her fingers hovered inches from it. She didn't need to touch. She just needed to know it was real. He didn't pull away, didn't flinch. Just met her gaze steady, like he'd been waiting for her to see it. A scar like that wasn't given. It was taken. With fire. With cruelty. And with the kind of hate that dressed itself in righteousness. She felt her throat tighten. Not from pain, but recognition. He had worn it first, carried it longer, lived through it. And still, he had made it to her. She sat back slowly, that name-stained cloth still clutched in her palm, and studied the man across from her. He had been branded, just like her. But he hadn't let it end him. And now he was here, with her, quiet and breathing proof that surviving didn't mean surrendering. She looked at the scar one last time and whispered the truth. Only silence ever taught her. Me too. The news spread faster than fire on dry grass. She was alive. Bruised, yes. Broken, maybe. But breathing. That alone was enough to make the town uneasy. They'd already buried her, in words if not in ground. Said she'd fled into the hills. Said she'd asked for it. Said her silence was admission, and her blood the end of the story. But now she was back, just barely. And the lie they built around her was cracking. The sheriff came before noon, sweat on his brow and a folded paper in his hand like it meant something. He knocked once, then stepped back. The door opened slow. The cowboy stood there. No gun in his hand. No badge on his chest. Just that same silence, thick as timber and twice as unmovable. The sheriff cleared his throat. Said he'd come to ask a few things. Said folks were worried. Said if someone was hiding a fugitive, it could bring trouble. The cowboy said nothing. Didn't invite him in. Didn't reach for the law. Just stood, boots planted, eyes shaded by the brim of his hat. Behind him, she sat in the corner, coat draped over her lap, breath shallow. Her face still wore the bruises of what they let happen, but her eyes, those didn't blink. She says you dragged her, the sheriff muttered, eyes skimming the edge of the doorframe. That true? Still no answer. Because the man she accused is one of ours. The silence held. Heavy. Final. The sheriff stepped back, said something about returning later, about keeping things quiet. The cowboy didn't move, just shut the door slow. And behind it, she exhaled for the first time all day. Because sometimes the strongest defense isn't a voice. It's someone choosing not to let you be erased. The coat hung heavy on her shoulders, too large, sleeves rolled, but it carried the weight better than she ever had alone. She stepped out just past dawn, the sky still bruised with the last of night. The cabin door closed behind her without a sound. The cowboy followed, 3 paces back. Not guarding, not leading. Just there. Each step toward town was a quiet defiance. Her lips still split. Her eye still dark. But her spine didn't bend. They watched from windows, porches, behind curtains that shifted as she passed. The woman they'd named liar, whore, ghost. And yet here she was, walking. The forge sat at the end of Maine, soot-stained and half-sagged from years of disuse. Her father's tools had rusted where he left them. No one had dared to use them since. She gripped the door latch, paused, then opened it. Inside, the air was thick with memory. Charcoal, sweat, metal. A scent she hadn't let herself miss. She lit the coals with hands that still bore the yellowing fingerprints of pain. Laid the kindling slow. Fed it with breath. The flames caught. The cowboy didn't speak. Just leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, watching her without demand. She lifted the hammer. Let it rest in her palm. The same hammer her father once placed in her hand when she was 13 and too angry to cry. The first strike echoed loud, not just in the room, but in the street outside. A sound of return, of fire reclaimed. She shaped nothing yet, just metal to flame, flame to steel, heat to rhythm. And as the townsfolk listened, too ashamed to look her in the eye, the woman they left bleeding now stood in fire again. Only this time it was hers. They didn't say her name out loud. Not anymore. Not the way they used to, curled in mockery, sweetened with contempt. Now they said it in whispers, if at all. In glances. In the tight clench of a jaw when she passed. She walked through town with soot on her skin, ash in her hair, and fire beneath her fingernails. Her coat hung open now. She wasn't hiding the bruises, wasn't hiding anything. The townsfolk looked, then looked away. Not from disgust, from something colder. Fear. Not because she had changed, but because she hadn't. Because she'd stood back up and kept walking, and because she wasn't alone. He followed just behind her, coat long, boots loud, silence louder. No badge, no words, no threats. Just presence, just stillness. That was what unnerved them. The men who laughed when she fell now stepped aside in silence. The women who turned their backs now crossed the street before she reached them. Children stared until their mothers pulled them away. No one offered forgiveness. No one asked what happened, and she didn't owe them the telling. The blacksmith's boy once dared to call her a witch. That was before he saw the cowboy carve a handle from mesquite and hand it to her without a word. Saw the way she took it, not like a gift, but like it was hers by right. The boy never said it again. At the general store, the clerk's hands trembled when he gave her change. At the saloon, no one laughed when she passed, and as she walked down the center of that brittle town, her shoulders didn't hunch, her chin didn't drop, because the world had tried to shame her into silence. But he stood behind her like silence could be strength. He came back just after sundown, stumbling through the dust like the town owed him something. Bottle in one hand, smile slick with rot. His coat hung crooked, belt half loosed, eyes already glassed with drink and hunger. The townsfolk watched from behind shutters and porches. None moved. None called out. Just waited, like they always did, to see how far he'd go before regret caught up. She was by the forge, hammer in hand, sweat still drying on her collarbone. The flames inside cast long shadows, and her name was still on the metal she'd been shaping, half-etched, half-earned. He called to her, loud, crude, said she'd forgotten her place, said he'd come to finish what he started. She didn't answer, didn't look at him, just set the hammer down. He took that as invitation, stepped closer, raised his voice, raised his hand. That's when the cowboy moved. No rush, no warning. Just one step forward from the side of the forge where he'd been waiting in stillness like stone waits for a storm. He didn't reach for a weapon, didn't speak, just placed himself between them like it had always been his place. The man laughed, until he saw the cowboy's eyes. Then he faltered. He swung anyway. Out of pride, out of spite. The cowboy didn't dodge. He caught the wrist midair, held it, not with rage, with something colder. Final. For one breath, everything held. Then the drunk dropped the bottle, dropped his bravado, and staggered back with a face gone pale. The town saw it then. Not just the silence, but what it could do. She didn't say thank you, didn't have to. Because the man who broke her once had raised his hand again. But this time, it didn't land. The crowd lingered after he left, scattered like ash in the wind. No one said a word. Not even the drunk, now slumped against the side of the trough, cradling his wrist like it still held heat. She stood in the doorway of the forge, backlit by flame, arms crossed over a chest that no longer caved. The cowboy hadn't moved. He still stood between her and what the town thought it could do to her. No gun was drawn, not even touched. But something cracked that day. Not ribs. Not bone. A lie. The lie that said she was fragile. That pain would keep her quiet. That shame would keep her small. The cowboy's silence had always been heavy. But now, it echoed. Through saloon windows, past church pews, into the softest corners of gossip. He didn't speak, but the town heard him. She stepped forward. Past him. Past the memory of what had been done. She walked to the man on the ground and looked him full in the face. Not to forgive. Not to plead. Just to make sure he saw her standing. He didn't meet her eyes. That was enough. She turned. Went back to her fire. Her metal. Her name. And when the hammer rose again, it wasn't just steel that rang out, it was truth. He followed, as always, just a few steps behind. The sheriff didn't come that night. The preacher didn't visit. The town slept uneasy. No bullets were fired. No revenge was taken. But something ended. Not her. The story they'd written for her. The one that said she'd stay down. The sun had begun its slow descent, lazy and gold, when she stepped out of the forge, hands black with ash and heat. Behind her, the anvil still steamed. The coals still whispered. But the work was done. She held the sign steady in both hands, iron, thick, hammered clean. Letters cut deep, edges smoothed. It didn't glint. It didn't boast. Just her name. Lena. No last name, no fathers, no husbands, no shame. She climbed the ladder slow, each step a quiet declaration. The townsfolk watched from their windows. No one approached. Not this time, not anymore. He stood below, boots planted, coat brushing the backs of his heels. Watching. Not guarding. Witnessing. She nailed the sign to the beam with strokes measured and firm. One for every time they'd tried to strip her voice. One for the nights she'd folded her worth into silence. One for the girl who almost didn't get back up. When she stepped down, sweat streaking her brow, he didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His eyes met hers, and in that stillness she felt it. The full weight of a name reclaimed. Children would pass the forge in years to come and ask what it meant, why it didn't say blacksmith or trade or goods. Their mothers would tell them, it didn't have to. Everyone already knew. That's where Lena worked, where she stood again, where fire didn't consume her, it answered her. And the man at her side, the one no one could name, the one who never left, he stood beside her then, the way he had from the beginning, still silent, still there. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like something broken. She felt forged.